beautiful day on October 29th of 2007 when I proudly walked up the steps of Sproul Hall at UC Berkeley and turned in my 864-page thesis to finally become Dr. Donahue. But all the while, I knew that in the back of my mind, 18 hours later, I was being recalled to active duty to go serve in Iraq. I was about to become Lieutenant Commander Donahue, in charge of a 600-person battalion running convoys and projects all over Al-Anbar, Iraq. I was going to change my nice, cozy little sweatshirts and t-shirts and sneakers from head to toe camouflage and cowboy boots, or combat boots. I was going to trade in my laboratory where I was doing experiments on different types of soil and how they react to earthquakes, to going to Iraq that's filled the air with sand and silt and lots of really angry insurgents. Now, last month, I was able to retire from 27 years of both active and reserve military duty. And during those times, whenever I'm on military duty, I wear camouflage from head to toe. But there's a couple things that I've noticed when I'm wearing this camouflage. I wind up standing a little bit straighter. My voice gets a little bit deeper, and I start to talk really directly to other people. And also my language gets a whole lot more colorful. And these are not bad traits to have. And what I've realized is that those are little bits of other camouflage that I've put on myself, on my kind of normal, happy, bubbly self, that whenever I put this uniform on. But I've also noticed a couple side effects, and that is I'm more serious. And I don't laugh as much. These are little bits of camouflage that I figuratively put on when I literally wear my camouflage. Now today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome and camouflage. And you're probably wondering, what do the two actually have to do with each other? Well, a lot of times we camouflage ourselves, just like putting on armor, when we don't feel comfortable in our situations, and that imposter syndrome starts to take over. So what is imposter syndrome? And I like to call them the clouds of doubt. Have you ever been in a room and you start to look around and realize, wow, how did I get here? I'm not smart enough to be here. Look at all these other qualified people. I'm never going to live up to them. They're more famous. They have better tables in the background than I do. These are the thoughts of imposter syndrome. And it's absolutely okay to have them. Everybody in the world has imposter syndrome from one time or another. It doesn't matter if you're a man, you're a woman, you're old, you're young. Everybody has imposter syndrome from one time or another. The question is, how are you going to get over it? And I'll tell you a quick story of when I let imposter syndrome win. I was on a board, and this board was made up of geotechnical earthquake engineers, and they were the godfathers of what I do. And I'm sitting at the end of the table, and I'm really excited to be there. And I'm looking around, and we call them the graybeards because they're like old white guys with, they have beards and they're gray. And we call them the graybeards, and they're sitting at the end of the table. I'm like, wow, that is really cool, I'm here. And they looked down at me, and they didn't know my name, and so they just called me little blonde girl. Hey, little blonde girl. And it didn't seem like it was a mean thing, but it started to get into my self-conscious. I'm just a little blonde girl at the end of the table. And I went out and I did something rather rash. I dyed my normal hair a dark chocolate brown. Now, I know we all change our hair color from time to time. In the summertime, we put on highlights. But I knew in my heart, I just wanted to look smarter. I didn't want to be the little blonde girl at the end of the table. I wanted to try to blend in with my counterparts and not stick out. And what I didn't realize is that they were calling me little blonde girl, just like I called them the graybeards. It was just a sign of affection. But what I more importantly missed is that I was meant to be there. They needed me. They needed me for the analytics that I was going to provide, and I deserved to be there. because I kept thinking, I'm not worthy of these guys. What I didn't realize is that I had beat out several other people to be in that room that day. And I mess it up. And I didn't realize what I had because I let imposter syndrome win. Has anybody heard of Mike Myers? He's a comedian. You know, he's what, So I Married an Axe Murderer, all the Austin Power movies. He was interviewed a couple years ago. And he said, I'm afraid every morning that the no-talent police are going to come and break down my door and arrest me because I'm a fake and I'm a fraud and people are going to find out that I'm not funny. This is a guy worth $200 million and he's made so many successful films, and yet he has imposter syndrome. And I think he's kind of funny. But that's what imposter syndrome is. The question is how do we get over it? So the first thing that I want you all to realize is that when you have imposter syndrome and it starts to take over, just realize that a change needs to be made. That's the very first thing. So I'll tell you a story. I was a young junior officer and I just got to the battalion and I was put in charge of 14 people and I was so excited. I'd never led anybody before in my life and now I'm leading 14 people and I didn't know what I was doing. Now, as the administrative officer, I'm in charge of all of the correspondence that comes in and out of the battalion. And we do evaluations to make sure that people can get promoted. So one of my first tasks is I had to take this huge stack of evaluations and I had to give it to my boss. So I take this in and I give it to my boss and he whips out a red pen. And I mean, he just goes to town on these things. I mean, he's just writing all over. I mean, he's scratching. And I mean, there's literally like ink is like dripping off the entire thing. It's like a bloody massacre. I mean, it's like you cut into like a raw steak and that stuff. That's what this stack of evaluations looked like. And I mean, it was horrible. And he yelled at me and he degraded me. And how dare you give this to me? You're an officer in the United States Navy. How dare you give this to me? Oh, okay, I got it. So I take the evaluations and I bring them back to my team, and I set it down, and I was like, wow, guys, we got to really step up our game. We got to get this right. So we go and we work all night, and they give me the stack. So I go back to my boss, and I'm kind of proud. I'm like, there you are, sir. Takes out that red pen and just goes to town again. I mean, he is just scribbling all over. I'm surprised that there's red ink left in the pen. And he's just going after it. Like, I mean, it's just like a bloody massacre. And I'm like, oh my God, he yells at me and he means me. Get back in that office. You get this right. Okay, I got it. And so I think I need to figure out this whole leadership thing because apparently I'm not doing it right. And so I didn't know what I was doing. And so I looked to my superior officers. I was like, well, how did they lead? Well, they were all yellers. And so I thought, okay, well, I guess this is what you do. You yell at people to make them do what you want them to do, right? All right, I got this. So I take this bloody massacre and I go into the bullpen and I slam it down on the desk and I demean my people and I yell at them. And how dare you give me this crap? How dare you be in the United States Navy? How dare you go and embarrass me in front of my boss? I don't care how late you have to stay up. You get this done right. I can't believe you. Like, just get out. Like, went out, I slammed the door. So that was about 24 years ago. I'm still embarrassed by how I treated those people because that's not me. That's not who I am. I'm not a yeller. I'm an empathetic type of leader. And I had to go home that night and I had to really realize, am I meant to be a United States Naval officer? Because I can't lead like that. I was trying to be something that I wasn't. I was trying to blend in with the other officers. And that's what I became to my team. I was one of those other officers because I wasn't being my true self. And I realized that I had to make a change. And that's one of the first things that we do when we have imposter syndrome. We don't know how to act. Realize a change needs to be made. Because a lot of times when we're looking at other people and we're comparing ourselves to other people, that's when those doors of imposter syndrome start to open up and those clouds of doubt start to come in. So I want you to think about that. When you start to compare yourself to others, That is the thief of joy. When you go into a room and you look to see all of these really fabulous people that are here and think, wow, I could never live up to that. I don't want you to think of their strengths as your weakness. I want you to look at them as your inspiration. I want you to be able to stand and say, I know my strengths. Now, who's ever heard of know your strengths and weaknesses, right? Okay, that's so cliche. I know, it's very cliche. But think about this. In 1400 BC, know thyself was one of the Delphic maxims that was written on the Temple of Apollo. It's the first time we've ever seen that. And what that tells me, if it was relevant to those old guys back then, it's probably relevant for us today. We have to know who we are. What are our strengths? And so when those imposter syndrome clouds of doubt start to take over our mind, this is the first thing that I do. I go to the copier, I grab a piece of paper, I take out a pen, it's not red, and I start to write down all of my different accolades. What did I do? What are my victories? And I start to write all of that down. And there's something about when you hold that in front of your face, you start to gain a little bit of confidence back. And you start to get a little bit of courage. I don't care if you won the 6th grade science fair. Write it down. Because I also want you to look at those words. How hard did you have to work to win that 6th grade science fair? How hard did you have to do to just absolutely kill it in that meeting? You have the ability to do great things. And whenever you write that down, you start to realize that. I have a good friend and he has imposter syndrome all the time, he says. So what he does is he has a little book that he takes around with him. And every time he has a win, anytime he has a victory, he just writes that down. So that when those clouds of doubt start to come back, he can just take that book and he can start flipping through the pages. And he realizes, you know what, I have worth. I have my own power that I can stand in. And those clouds of doubt start to dissipate. Now, when we're comparing ourselves to others, a lot of times we start to feel like we could be the token. Who here has ever felt like the token female? Or the token person of color in a room? Right? That's a horrible feeling to have. Do you want to be the token? No. That is a horrible, horrible feeling. We don't want to be put in a position because of our race or because of our ethnicity or our gender. We don't want to be the token. So when you start to feel like the token, here's the second thing that I have for you. I want you to change your optics. And what I mean by that is I want you to look at that position that you're in, and we're going to shift it a little bit. I have a really good friend. Her name is Rachel. And she was hired onto the C-suite. She's the first female in this organization to ever get to this position. And so I was talking to her and I'm like, this is great. I can't believe this, Rachel. Like, I can't believe you got there. And she says, yeah, but I'm the only female in the room all the time. I'm like, oh, well, how does that make you feel? And she's like, well, I feel like I can't be my true self. I feel like I have to be a softer version of myself because if I'm a direct person like I normally am, I'm afraid they're going to call me names. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? So she feels like she has to be a softer version. And she feels like she's in this, like, she has to fit this mold of what a female executive is supposed to be, and she can't be her true self. And she says it's exhausting to be like that. So I would encourage her to say that she needs to change her optics a little bit. Instead of saying, I'm the only woman in the room, she needs to say, I'm the only woman in the room. That is awesome. She broke through the glass ceiling. She beat out so many other people to get to that position. But just think of that one phrase. I'm the only female in the room. 2, I'm the only female in the room. Now she has the ability to affect change. She has the ability to do all of these different things, but she has to get out of the mentality of feeling like the victim and realize that inside she's a real warrior. She worked harder than everybody else. She's published more papers. She's a brilliant engineer. She's a fantastic leader. She has a warrior inside of herself that she's kind of covered up with all this other camouflage that she feels like she has to blend in with her counterparts. So she has to start thinking about, how do I take all that off and be the true warrior that I really am supposed to be? That's what we are. We all have this inner warrior inside of us. So how do we get there? How do we get to that point? How do we start to strip off all of that camouflage and imposter syndrome? Well, the third thing that I have for you is it's just time to act. Now, maybe going from 0 to 60 miles per hour is probably not the best way to do that. You know, I will tell you, I've been in the military for 27 years, and I still have a little bit of camouflage that I wear. I will just tell you that if I became my happy, bubbly, goofy, nerdy self while in uniform, I don't think everybody would really resonate to that very well. So I still keep a little bit of that very straight back, very serious on most of the time. I have been able to take off some of my figurative camouflage. You can think of it taking off my hat because I'm not a yeller. I've embraced my empathy and the way that I lead, but I'm not ready to take all of my camouflage off at once. I'll tell you that on my civilian side, oh yeah, all the camouflage is off. I'm a normal, goofy, bubbly person whenever I go to the office. And people like to work with me because they know that they're getting the true Jenn Donahue. And it's okay that if you're in certain parts of your life and you're not ready to take all your camouflage off, that's okay. But I would say have a plan on how to get there. I mean, even Superman. Superman had camouflage. He was called Clark Kent. You know, that little nerdy guy? Because you can't just like walk around down the street with a cape behind you, you know, gets caught in stuff. You ever tried to sit down on a cape? It's really uncomfortable. So even Superman had a little bit of camouflage, which was Clark Kent. Now, I've talked to you a lot about taking off the camouflage. Are there times when it's okay to wear the camouflage? I would say yes. If you're going into a new job or a new social setting, you know, it's okay to wear a little bit of camouflage at first. Go in there, get a lay of the land. Who are these people? What are their values? What do they hold most dear? What's important to them? And then you have to have a plan to start taking that camouflage off. Now, I know a lot of us want to take off our camouflage and we don't know where to start. If you need a little bit of help, please come see me at the back room. You know, we'll sit down, we'll do some one-on-ones. I spoke to a lovely lady earlier today and we started a plan for her to start to get over her imposter syndrome as well. But start to think about, yes, I am wearing camouflage. I don't feel comfortable where I am and I want to be my true, genuine self. So I want you to think about maybe 2 to 3 things that I've said today. Write those down because I will tell you that if you look at those and you commit to them, and you really take them to heart today, what you do today will forever change your optics and where you can take yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenn. Thank you, Jenn.